Welcome to Unlayer, the show where we explore next-gen blockchains. I'm your host, Saul, alongside my co-host here, Dave. And today we're joined by Chris from Dialect. For those who are not aware, Dialect is a protocol and developer stack for delivering your product experiences everywhere. They've been around in Solana for a long time. Their roots are actually in building developer tooling, but they've also experimented in building products for Telegram and have most recently been catching a lot of attention for the Blinks primitive, which is something we're super excited to talk a lot about today, as well as just what the implications for this primitive are for the future of on-chain interactions. So Chris, thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us.
Yeah, of course. Sal and Dave, longtime fans, so really appreciate you having us on.
Awesome. Well, let's start with Blinks. How would you describe what a blink is for someone that's never heard of it?
Yeah, this is an excellent question, and we've actually been experimenting with this a bit. It's this really simple primitive that's like deceptively simple. I think it's actually fairly complex in the things you can do with it. And even just within the last several months, like we launched earlier this summer, we've seen a variety of really creative takes on this. But like, maybe you both know Xerox Designer, just well-known product designer in the crypto ecosystem. We had him on our Twitter space maybe a month ago, and he asked me up front on the call, he's like, what's the most left curve way to describe like what a blink is? And I've been thinking on this, and the answer that I would give is blinks let you teleport buttons across the internet. That's like the dumbest possible way that I can describe what a blink is. I really like it too. I've really zeroed in on this. But Sal, you said this in your introduction. Like blinks let you share product experiences everywhere. That's like a little more of like the marketing speak. And that might sound counterintuitive. So like the backstory I would give on this is like, well, like I can share stuff on the internet already today. Like, you know, you're on a website or you're listening to an album on Spotify, you like copy the URL and you drop it, or you get the little share sheet. The reality is like you're sharing links to go to sites to do things. So let's just say like you copy an album on Spotify, drop it into iMessage, and it unfurls with this nice like image, title, description. It's very educational. It's informative. But ultimately, if you want to go do a thing, and we'll get to like the crypto native experiences are probably more relevant because of the uniquely crypto technology, but you have to go to the site to do the thing. And what blinks do is they bring more of your product experience right into the place where you share the link. And so beyond like an image, a title, and a description, one of the main use cases today, not the only one, I want to talk a little bit about some of the most exciting new developments we've seen, but one of the main use cases we've seen today is alongside that like link preview metadata, you can now teleport actual actions and buttons from the site directly into the blink. So we launched this earlier this year, and there's a little bit of nuance here, but the way we launched it was an integration directly into Twitter. So we like quite literally brought the crypto into crypto Twitter. How exactly we did that is I'm going to like hold off. We can certainly get into it if you're interested in that. But what that meant was on launch, you could like swap tokens from Jupiter directly through a Jupiter blink. You could buy the floor on NFT collections directly through a Tensor blink. You could vote on Helium governance directly from a Helium blink. And you can do it all directly from your timeline on Twitter without having to leave. Now, that was just one launch tactic. Our mission really with blinks is to teleport buttons across the internet. And like, maybe the last thing I would say here is typically we share pages. Like that's how we've learned to share the internet. We URLify pages. Our mission at Dialect with blinks is to URLify buttons, like to share, like if pages are nouns, it's to share verbs, like the action you would take. So that's kind of, that's the like, I think like 5 different explanations of what blinks are, but we're workshopping it live. So.
Sure. Yeah. And that last point you just made resonates with me a lot. So it's the verb, it's the action one wants to take on a particular website. Now, help me understand this. What was like the original vision or intent behind working on this primitive? Was there a certain use case that you thought, hey, it would be really cool if I could, swap in Twitter, a token on Twitter? Like, was there some central kind of theme here that drove at this?
I think there's a short and a long answer. I'll start with the short one. The short answer is there's not a specific use case that stands out to me as like the one I care the most about. It's more, I've had this like decade plus long obsession with like, how can I just do things faster on the internet? And so the other way that we like to describe Blinks is you have the internet, like the whole internet is just like a huge part of the internet economy is a call to action somewhere and an action somewhere else. And not only would a business care about flattening that, like consumer crypto or otherwise is obsessed with minimizing the number of steps to do a thing. And Blinks quite literally like flatten the action. It teleports the action right into the call to action. And so that's like good for a business. But as like an impatient consumer, my obsession has just been like anytime I have to fumble around on something, it just drives me nuts. And so our ambitions with Blinks is, I think this is a technology that is relevant way beyond just crypto. And the bet is that crypto, which is like this, has this unique superpower that allows you to take action anywhere at any time on anything, that as more crypto infrastructure eats more of the internet, Blinks are going to like ride that wave. And eventually I just like, my classic example is just like, I'll get an email telling me my credit statement is due and I'll like see it on my phone, like, like my credit card bill is due through my whatever, Bank of America, let's say, as boomer as it gets. And like, I'll tap the call to action in the email and it takes me into like an embedded Safari browser on my iPhone where I'm not logged in and I can't take the action. My credentials are not in my keychain. And it's just like, that barrier to doing the thing I know I want to do. I just want to I want to flatten that and make it as fast and as easy as possible. As far as crypto use cases, I didn't answer your question. I'd be happy to dive into some cool stuff we've seen there, but yeah.
I mean, do you feel that this is then a seismic shift, like within just links itself and sharing links around the internet? And is it crypto that has sort of unlocked that, and that's why it hasn't really been possible up until now?
That's right. I quite literally, the phrase that I use these days, and we've got a very long road ahead of us, but if I could do exactly what I wanted with Dialect, we describe it as like, we want to terraform the internet. Like we want to create a new kind of way that you share links. That's a very long road. And any good startup focuses on solve the problem for a small market first, ace it, make a small number of people very happy. And I think of like crypto as that ecosystem. But you're right, it's uniquely made possible by the wallet as like this new way that you prove who you are on the internet. I think if we deleted the internet today and just had to start from scratch with all of our learnings, like we knew everything we knew. One, I think asymmetric, like wallet-like public key cryptography would power much more of authentication on the internet. Obviously with like social recovery, social sign-in, like those all matter, of course. But then number two is I think we would have just fundamentally designed link previews, open graph, the way that you share, like all of that would just be different. Like there's a ton of historical path dependence to like the way the internet's designed today. And what we want to do at Dialect is make a very big and successful crypto business, but take a legit swing at like, is there an opportunity to like terraform and redo and redistribute a new way to share experiences?
Well, so right now you're on Twitter, and that's, as you said, what you launched with. But is it simple to upload it to every social media platform on the internet? Are there going to be roadblocks, kinks with each of them that you're going to have to work out? How sort of ubiquitous can this become, do you think?
Yeah. The short answer here is it's actually quite easy to integrate new platforms. My bias as like early stage startup founder is always to do less but better. And that's why we've been more focused on what Blinks are capable of and less about what sites they're on. I think crypto Twitter is like a great community.
Yeah.
But I would even go so far as to say that there's kind of 2 points. Number one is there's two things about Blinks today, one of which is actually not strictly a Blink thing. And that thing is the use of like, how do we get Blinks into crypto, like into Twitter, like in the timeline? And that's actually not strictly speaking a part of like the real Blinks and Actions specification. And this is done, just a quick side story on this. The way that we take tweets and turn them into like full Blinks is in collaboration with your favorite Chrome extension wallets like Phantom, Backpack, Solflare. Now, like I think we've got 10 wallets now with like OKX, Bybit, and a bunch of multi-chain wallets as well. the trick is Chrome extensions are actually capable of reading and modifying websites that you're on with your permission is usually the best way to do this. And so the creative technique that we had was we partnered with, I think it was Phantom and Backpack at launch, and now we've got about 10 wallets. And what they do is when you turn the feature on in your Chrome extension, if you're on browser, on web, and Phantom detects a blink URL, because it is just a URL, like you're just sharing links. How exactly it detects that isn't, again, we can come back to, but if it detects that, it modifies Twitter to change the UI and actually add the superpowers, like the blink superpowers. That Chrome extension technique is actually not, strictly speaking, where I want to see blinks in the long term. I think it's an amazing creative go-to-market. We've had a ton of fun seeing teams build with this, but it's actually native integrations. Like the Twitter engineers did not integrate Blink's technology. It's Phantom and Backpack and Solflare that are kind of making this experience possible. And that has a host of limitations, like you can't use them on mobile today. You obviously need to be using them on desktop in a browser where you have one of those Chrome extensions. Not everybody does crypto from the same place that they like scroll the timeline. And then in addition to that, there's just like a number of other qualifying factors. I'm more interested in getting the Twitter experience right than trying to bring that imperfect experience elsewhere. But then part two, but that said, we are kicking off an initiative where we're going to have a call to the community to ship like, and it's a good timing with your question of like Facebook, Reddit. People have joked about LinkedIn. So it's a couple months in now to Blinks, but and probably could have done this right away because it's so easy. Our SDK is like incredibly extensible, highly modular. It's just not been my personal priority. So we're going to be bringing them to these other Web 2 platforms. Where I want to end the answer to your question, though, is I'm actually most excited about, and all of our internal efforts right now and all of our partnership efforts at Dialect, and this is a little bit of alpha here, are in bringing Blinks to more Web3 native platforms. And so I'm going to pause there, but just mention that Drip, the one of the most popular NFT and creator platforms on Solana, actually natively integrated Blinks into their experience. And I'm be happy to share more about what that is.
Yeah, so that actually kind of ties to the question I was going to ask you, which is what have been some of the more powerful ways people have used Blinks, I guess on Twitter so far mostly, and what are you kind of excited about as far as future use cases for it?
Yeah, and I think I just got off a call with a team that we're considering being design partners with, and I'll say something that I just said to them 20 minutes ago, which is the utility and usefulness, and I think success of a Blink has less to do with Blink's technology and less to do with the team behind. Like, obviously you want to do fun and interesting things, but it has a lot to do with where it's being shared in the context. And so some of the biggest projects on Solana, I won't name any specifically, have Blinks that I don't think have gotten a ton of use because they just don't make sense as something you would want to do on the timeline. So like the context around where you're seeing something and why you want to do that is highly dependent on where you're seeing it. And then there are some smaller projects that were like brand new, never existed before. A week after we launched Blinks, they dropped a Blink on the timeline that just blew up and got like millions of views, hundreds of thousands of mints, all that. So like we've seen some amazing success stories. I'll share a couple there in no particular order, but one of my favorite first Blinks that we saw was Baxis, the collectible spirits. They do RWAs for the audience, in case you're wondering, in the way that fine art is an asset class where people buy it to invest as like a diversifying their portfolios. Similarly, like very nice whiskeys and other spirits are like an actual, like more and more people who've invested in fine art invest in whiskey now. One of our favorite teams that we've seen in all of crypto is the Baxis team. And they have a relatively smaller following on Twitter, but when they launched their Blink, the Blink itself, it was to like, collect an NFT for a whiskey with a very interesting provenance. And the tweet got like 500,000 views, just explosive engagement. And I don't want to quote an exact number, but I know they sold well over $75,000 in revenue, like off of that whiskey sale. So that was a really fascinating e-commerce Blink. There have been teams that have experimented with like launching free collectibles. So there was 100,000 NFT mint that was also shortly after Blink's launch that I think we all know NFTs are down today. And one, it was a free mint, but then the trading on secondary blew up and ended up like peaking, topping all chains for 24-hour trading volume of any NFT. So that was like really neat to see. And then like a number of others, we've seen some creative influencers, like the 3Land team actually powered. So you probably know Bangers from the 3Land team. They powered that 100K NFT mint, and she's been doing a lot of fun and experimental stuff with Blinks. And then one of our favorite influencers is the Superbase team, Jakey and Steve.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done some very fun and creative experiences with these as well. Again, these are all tailored toward the like, I think swapping tokens is not something you do on Twitter. And so trading we've seen less of. And it's more like free mints, claims, e-commerce, like Keystone Wallet, one of the leading hardware wallet providers. They also did a sale of their hardware through a Blink. And we have a number of others coming on that front. Maybe the last thing I'll say here is trading generally is less common on Twitter. But to my point about Drip, what Drip has done is they've quite literally teleported individual buttons from Mallow for sort of like auctions and limited editions, another NFT platform, which maybe you've heard of, as well as Tensor, the leading Solana marketplace for secondary trades of the NFTs that you mint on Drip. And that trading example, there's a significantly higher level of engagement directly on Drip's site, despite not being nearly as large an audience as crypto Twitter. And it's because the intent of like, I want to just get this NFT because I know I want it because I'm on this beautiful, very immersive experience on Drip's site. I know I like this creator, and I'll just buy the floor right there on the spot. So they're really just very contextual. They're very unopinionated technology that really just depends on where it's being shared on what context.
Now, kind of inverting this question a bit, because you mentioned some user actions aren't necessarily popular on Twitter. I guess, what are some contexts that you think are really exciting for people to start bringing Blinks into? I think maybe one you alluded to, or maybe you didn't, but just the idea of like minting something from Drip outside of like Tensor, or even if for people that trade a lot, you know, one common place people trade is in Telegram. So perhaps that's like an area you guys are thinking about exploring.
Yes, very keen to explore Telegram, which Sal, I know you and I have spoken about, and to the extent that and I don't want to ramble too endlessly, but I could go on forever about this. Let me give 3-ish short answers. So, in terms of environments where there's like really good context, I think Drip is a great starting point of that. Of like, I don't really care that it's a Blink. Like Blinks, I think honestly have too much mind share. Like nobody wakes up and is just like, oh man, awesome, like link previews. Like nobody says that. It's just getting a job done for you. And so like it's a button on Drip. So the best place to use Blinks is a place where someone might form an intent to do a thing. And then the job of the Blink is just to help you get the job done faster, fewer clicks. Like that, it's just trying to flatten the internet. Another really high value place that might be is in these Telegram environments where trading is ubiquitous, like incredible, amazing. Like it's been really exciting to see some of the things you're building, Sal. That's much better than Twitter. The way we think about Blinks is they allow teams to bring much more of crypto into their product in a fraction of the time. So I think the job of a Blink in a Telegram trading bot would not necessarily be to power that key action, which is to trade, but to allow the development team behind the Telegram trading bot to bring virtually every other possible thing you could want to do, that really deep and long tail of other crypto experiences you might want to do, given that you do own a token now. So that might be, you've got this money sitting around in your Telegram trading bot in that wallet, and maybe you actually want to deploy it into some short-term yielding contracts like that. You might actually, and so Blinks really are like a lighter fluid or like a jet fuel for like the proliferation of every experience. And the brilliance is like, for example, Lulo, one of the DeFi protocols in Solana that allows you to earn off of your crypto, they built a Blink once, and they did. And any team, including, for example, Sal, like you could integrate that experience, and it would be like a timely recommendation to a user directly in the Telegram experience, and you smash it, and you just don't have to do any work. It's just a URL, and boom, it unfurls. And so you don't have to integrate SDKs. You don't have to do any of that stuff. And so we kind of think of it as this way to like bring the long tail of crypto everywhere. And it's like, that's the promise of crypto. One of them is composability, and we haven't delivered on it because it's not easy enough to do. And then maybe like last quick example is virtually the same, which is what we're really excited. So again, Telegram, yeah, not exactly like a native crypto platform, but Telegram bots are natively crypto. They are built from the ground up to be crypto. So I consider that like a native crypto experience. The other obvious one here is the mobile wallets. I think they have anywhere between 100 and 1,000x the users of your average, like let's say monthly active users of a dApp. And imagine, for example, like you're a new mobile wallet user. I'm not going to name anyone specifically, but we're in progress on some of this now, and we'll have more to share soon. But imagine you're a new mobile wallet user. You've never touched crypto before, and you learn through a Blink about staking for the first time, or you learn from a Blink directly in the mobile wallet being surfaced to you as a recommendation saying, you've got USDC sitting around, you can earn 4 to 8% off of that, off of some interesting pool. And so it's really an engine for the discovery and like the proliferation of crypto. That's kind of how we're thinking about it. Getting users more on chain, put it that way.
I think a couple of things that you've hinted at, made reference to so far. One of them is like maybe you can do multiple actions with these Blinks, and correct me if I'm wrong. But if that is the case, to me that seems to be another sort of seismic shift forward in UI, from having to do everything individually, because it can be on your timeline, and it's almost like maybe a basic version of an AI agent or something. Like, do you want us to go and do this with your wallet, this complicated action, which is going to involve maybe multiple protocols? I don't know. So can you talk on that? Is that going to be possible? And how far can we expand these actions?
Yeah, the two-part answer. Part number one is we would love to see teams throw LLMs at this stuff. So one of the major initiatives for us is we run a public registry of all the known Blinks in the world. And it's still very lightweight information, like a base domain, which you can then call to get transactions and simulate them. So like if you could actually train an AI agent on understanding transaction simulations, there's actually like already a lot of information. But the other thing we want to do is help publicly digestible information, both what Blinks are trending, how they're being used. I mentioned the Jupiter swap Blink. The token pair is encoded in the URL. So like even discovery of like which token pairs are being used, like a lot of that data doesn't exist yet. And we would love to make it available for teams to experiment with what you're talking about. And then quite literally, you can have AI agents just sort of stringing these together and helping serve them to users. I think it's an incredibly interesting design space. We're a little early just based on the raw data that's available, but at Dialect, we're in the business of trying to surface and make that information available. So we've got a lot more coming on kind of like discoverability, introspectability, just the raw data available on usage, including both off-chain kind of interactions with the Blinks all the way through to completed and succeeded transactions. And then part number two is quite literally in the Blink, like the actions in Blink specification. We launched this about a month ago, and we just haven't made a ton of noise about it. We support a technique called action chaining or Blink chaining. And what that allows you to do is within a single engineer, like ignore the AI agent for a moment, a single engineer can actually string together multiple experiences. And so like an example of this would be an e-commerce flow where first you enter your email address and shipping information, check some boxes on what you want. And then the second page, and that would like securely using signed message, send that information using your wallet as authentication, like off-chain, privately and securely. And then step two would be to pay. Another one would be, for example, the Jupiter team wants to do this for Jupiter governments, and it would actually be almost like a Connect wallet experience where you first connect with your wallet and it understands, well, what's your voting power? Are you eligible to vote for this? Like there's just an infinite variety of these, and that's within a single experience. And then we expect developers also to like chain experiences from third parties together. So not just on the AI agent side, but in the core capabilities of Blinks. This is a relatively new, within the last couple of weeks, it's now available in all the wallets, but we expect to see quite a bit of like, you sort of pull multiple experiences into one.
Yeah. And just going back to the AI agents, but that's sort of where my mind was going with where this could end up, because if you think that maybe they're going to be these agents, which are going to be good at specific tasks, this could be the way that they get presented to you, because otherwise, how do you do it? You've maybe got a website and you're scrolling through the different agents. If it's going to be a very unnatural process, Whereas maybe this could be saying, let's see what's on the timeline right now. Let's see what you have in your wallet,
Yep.
because I assume that we can give access to the assets that you're currently holding. And let's give an, AI inspired action, all based on those sorts of things, directly to you on your timeline. I mean, that to me feels like sort of the obvious way that you could get the AI agents getting used by people.
Yeah. And I think it's a combination of two things. One is just more data available for these AI agents to get better at. And we at Dialect, is one of our core missions, or core initiatives over the next few months, is really to make sure these things are like the traffic that we're seeing through our site, like our APIs, all these services, the data that we do have is pretty remarkable. But they're hard to discover. So it's like, we want to provide that information to developers to work off of. And then point number two is something that like, it's almost kind of like dumb that at Dialect we didn't know this earlier. But after launching Blinks, and especially within the last 5-ish weeks, it's become clear to us that the extreme right curve description of Blinks that we've converged on is they are a service-based architecture for the construction and delivery of transactions. And that is a very arcane way to describe their benefit, but I think it's actually one of their true superpowers. And what I mean by that is, imagine you are an AI, you're building an AI agent, and you want to pull in, let's say, swaps on Jupyter or Radium. You want to pull in Pump.Fun. You want to pull in other kinds of experiences. You want to like bring in advanced DeFi for earning. Today, any product, ignoring AI agent, like any wallet that's tried to bring more experiences in, what they do is they integrate an SDK. Let's say the Drift SDK for doing perps, or the Jupyter SDK for doing swaps. And that's hundreds of lines of code that's very domain specific that you need to roll every time. And what Blinks do is they allow the Jupyter team to put that on a server, or the Drift team to put that on a server. You call a URL, and in like 3 lines of code, you have a ready to sign transaction. And so it is truly, I say, greater than a 10x speed up in your development time for integrating these remote experiences. And I think it might even be like closer to 100x. And so if you're spending 10th to 100th of the time on that, you can spend all your engineering time on things like, how do I surface the right transactions? How do I build my LLM? How do I create my AI agent? And so it really is just an accelerant. And that's like, again, a very unsexy way to describe Blinks, but that's the business I'm in. I want to build unsexy tools that just like get jobs done for developers.
Is a decent comparison here. I don't know if you're familiar with anon.com, but Blinks are kind of what we're talking about with respect to improving developer velocity. It reminds me a lot of basically it's an integration platform for agents where developers don't have to deal with SDKs. They just deal with Anon, and you could hook into a lot of different services to have agents be able to do things like log into travel sites, messaging sites, book a hotel, listen to music, or what have you, ride sharing. Do you think like thematically that's kind of what the job of this primitive is to just reduce the amount of work a developer needs to do to integrate something else, and probably more so crypto oriented?
Yeah. Excellent question, actually, Sal. And you're the first person to ask this question. I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this. Just to restate, to make sure I understand the question correctly, is like, there's another angle at which we can accomplish this, like flatten the internet and teleport buttons. And that's like the actual like spaghetti code behind buttons on the internet. It's like a disaster. This stuff's all siloed and kind of like piled into like the way that modern web frameworks allow you to instantly share URLs to pages, that doesn't exist for buttons. So we're throwing this other incredible new, like once in a millennium technology at the just like which is AI, to like scrape pages and figure out like where on earth is like the buy button, so we're throwing this like incredible sophisticated technology at the problem of automation, which automation is a kind of like reducing time to do a thing. And so there's almost like these opposite ends of the spectrum where at Dialect, I say we're interested in terraforming, in that we want to introduce developer tools to change the way that teams even build the buttons in their sites to make them all default shareable. And that's like a hygienic thing where like, if we do that right, there will be like a new wave of products built using this better hygiene that makes things default shareable. The flip side of it is this modern LLM stuff of just like scrape like crazy, just throw AI at a site to find out what the buttons are and then automate the process of like, you could teleport a button and just the AI figures out how to click it. And I think both are interesting and comparable, where I think my instinct is that giving developers the tools and the hygiene to like make buttons shareable so that they change their behavior actually has even deeper and more profound consequences to like how people develop on the internet. I won't go into this a lot, but Next.js is, I personally think, the best web development framework out in the world. And it has one of the most innovative ways of just like, you just build your site and they give you URLs for every page. And it's just a really nice developer experience. We're trying to do that for buttons. And I think there's a world for both of these to exist. The then last piece of it I would share is all of these AI agents. I haven't heard of Anon, but like you look at like the Rabbit R1 and some of these others, anytime you want them to automate things for you, they first say, well, okay, you want me to automate something for you on Expedia? You got to sign in with Expedia. And so it's still, you're dealing with this fractured internet where at the authentication level, there's problems. And it's like every single time you want an agent to automate a process for you on a remote site, you got to sign into that site. And that's crypto's superpower. That's not even Blink specific. That's just like, we really hope to see more and more infrastructure on the internet over, let's say, the next 5, 10, 15 years to like use wallet authentication. Then it's truly seamless.
Gotcha. So that's actually a really important point that I want to focus in on a bit is, so yeah, I agree. Like even these platforms like Anon or other similar ones, even if they make it a lot easier for developers to integrate other services, you're right. Like you still have to sign in. And that's not a really fun process for people, even if you have password manager or whatever to make it simpler. So what you guys are focusing on is an industry and a market that has kind of solved that problem already with wallet authentication and just makes it even more seamless to have, whether it's an agent or a user, kind of just tap into different services and hit a button and it does the thing they want it to do, whether it's on Jupyter or Tensor or whatever other application. So potentially very, very powerful. Actually, the question I have here is, from a developer standpoint, what can they tap into today? Like what, I guess, protocols or apps have integrated Blink such that, you know, if we wanted to add that application to our product or some user flow, what's kind of on the menu for a developer that's looking to integrate?
I'm hesitant to give a wholesale answer because virtually there's, I think, almost 450 Blinks that have been built. And virtually every major project, I can name just a couple that haven't. And I'm not going to call them out because we're still badgering them. We're really excited to see. What I would say though, is most of them have been designed specifically for like the Twitter use or just sort of experimenting and seeing. So I would actually say today what we typically do at Dialect, so like the Drip example was Drip, Mallow, and Tensor largely just coordinated by themselves to make this technology happen. But we like to be in the loop to understand, we're still trying to feel out the design space of like, does one Blink by one project really make it useful everywhere? Or are there kind of nuances to like, depending on if it's getting surfaced as a recommendation within a wallet, or it's getting surfaced as a recommendation by a Telegram bot, or it's getting teleported very specifically into another product like Drip? What are the differences in the use cases and like how people use them? My short answer today would be, you can browse the registry. So if you go to dial.to, you'll see that there's a lot of different Blinks out there. But if you have a use in mind that you want to work on, we'd love to be involved in that conversation because I think we're still very early days in like how this technology really works. So sorry, I'll give one last very specific example. Like when the Drip team was integrating Mallow and Tensor, I think Mallow just worked out of the box. It was great. It did what they wanted, but they actually made some design and feature requests of Tensor. And so I think it's still very early days. We're like looking to get involved in those conversations and find out how we can support folks. And we're doing a number of them now. We're actually collaborating between multiple parties and just making sure we understand like how it's being used. So get in touch. Short answer is get in touch. We would love to work with you.
I've got a couple of questions maybe on business models. So, I mean, firstly, I suppose you are running a company, Dialect. What's in it for you guys? If you're creating this is open source software. Is there any revenue which is going to? Do you have any plans for how this could benefit the company in the long term? Just interested on that.
Yeah, I can give a little bit of high-level framing on how we think about the difference between, say, Blink's, the action specification, and Dialect as a technology
Mhm.
company. And then also share a little, I can give a couple teasers on some things that are coming. So first off, I would say, the action specification Blinks, which are largely synonymous, we actually have some changes coming there soon. I'm just going to call them Blinks for now. Hope that's okay. But the Blink specification, the blockchain link specification, is owned by Solana. And I think that's the right way to go because we are
Mhm.
sort of like a small early stage startup. And I think it's really important for confidence, long-term, all that. Dialect is a technology company built on top of that in the same way that loose metaphor, but it's my favorite, maybe
Mhm.
to a fault, but Git and GitHub are two very
Mhm.
different things. But for all intents and purposes today, like, I don't know, some people use Bitbucket and like GitLab and all that, but like GitHub really is like the
Mhm.
product everybody uses. And so we think of ourselves as the technology company that we expect to be very big and very profitable, built on top of an open source technology. And we're not like Blinks are not a protocol in the sense that like perpetual futures, like decentralized perpetual futures is a protocol. Like it's a
Mhm.
less about like it's more protocol in the traditional Web 2 sense. And the
Yeah.
internet is full of really big successful technology companies that were built around
Mhm.
open source protocols. Another example of this would be like OAuth, the open authentication mechanism or protocol, and say Okta or Auth0 is another great example. So like the range and variety of problems and the possibilities for monetization, I think are pretty extensive. That all said, we've got at least two ideas for how we want to monetize, maybe as many as like a
Mhm.
half a dozen or a dozen. Some of them are like very straightforward, others are very wacky, and they would be really cool to see if like very crypto native, really ambitious kind of, but like we've deliberately held off on any revenue because, and I'll state this briefly, like the moment you start charging for something, you sort of limit your creativity. It creates these
Mhm.
grooves in your product offering that I would say are frankly like very premature right now. So while we have this conversation with every customer of ours and everyone who builds with our technology, we've deliberately chosen to hold off because it truly is kind of like a blue sky. It's like a new market, and we want to understand the shape of that market before we really um, cut ourselves grooves that are too deep.
And then I suppose just whilst we're on business models, the other one that came to me is what power do the Web2 social media networks have to say, okay, I want a piece of the pie, or I'm going to stop you from interacting on my platform because I don't know, I want to go off and do a competitor piece, or I just don't like it, or whatever it may be. So, you know, how are you viewing those relationships with Elon and Zuck and the like?
So with the current way that Blinks work, which is Phantom or Backpack or other wallets inject them into Twitter, it would be a little bit of a cat and mouse. There's probably things that Twitter could do to like try to sort of fight back. They can't just turn it off in the normal way because it truly is just like a Chrome extension and modifying the web page, but they can certainly play a
Yeah.
little bit of cat and mouse. Um, I'm frankly like not too concerned or too interested in that future. And the reason I say this is because I don't think Chrome extension, sort of like web page modification, is product market fit for Blinks. Here's what I want to see happen. I want to see, and there's a very, very long road to this outcome. So we've deliberately not gotten in touch with these platforms because I think it's way too early to do that.
Mhm.
But the go-to-market that we're executing on now at Dialect, I want that at some point, Twitter or Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, like they show up to the table and they say, this is a really good technology for us to expand our revenue and integrate more and a greater variety of experiences, including obviously like the benefits of a new market like crypto as these platforms open up to that more. But basically, our go-to-market today is go work with native Web3 platforms whose engineers are actually integrating Blinks, none of this sort of
Mhm.
injection stuff. We're going to continue pushing on the like Chrome extension experience because I think it's really good, but grow that so that a few years from now, when Instagram starts poking around, it's like we want to restart our Web3 strategy.
Mhm.
They're going to see Blinks everywhere in the Web3 native ecosystems, and they're going to want to talk. And then in that world, I actually, and this, I know I didn't share what our actual business model is, but the bit that I'll share here is they would actually like through the system design, they would get a cut. So they would be incentivized. Like that actually is a feature. That's not a bug. I think they should, because they are a distribution mechanism for commerce, and they should absolutely be in the loop. But only interested in that when we get to the point where there's a native integration. It's like I am very excited to have that conversation, but it could be a few years out.
I think you've mentioned it a few times, your company being Dialect. I first came across you, I think, during the bear market when you started a messaging app, decentralized messaging app, is how I would describe it. I haven't really seen it on the timeline much anymore. So I'd just be interested to hear how your experiences were with that. And then maybe more broadly on SocialFi and what you thinking of the direction of that particular vertical.
Yeah, absolutely. So one, thanks for the shout out. I think we built an incredible product. This was in 2023, one of the best consumer experiences in crypto. We are not actively maintaining that. We stopped development on it in late 2023, so quite a bit ago now. The backstory behind this messaging app was actually, it was at the deepest point in the bear market, it was our medium to showcase a piece of technology that we had developed in 2022 that is a precursor to Blinks, and we called it the Smart Message. And so a little bit of backstory here. We actually launched in 2022. So March of 2022, we launched developer tools around alerts and notifications, which is actually alive and well today. We power alerts and notifications for a ton of Solana's biggest projects. And as a part of that, we debuted the concept of the Smart Message, which is quite literally the Blink, which is like teleport your product experiences anywhere. So imagine you're about to get liquidated on like a DeFi protocol. You could get an alert that you could just top up the collateral right from the alert. So it was really about flattening the action and the call to action. This goes all the way back to March of 2022 was when we debuted our notification stack and pre-announced the Smart Message. I'm giving a backstory here because I think it's kind of funny. Like basically November of 2022, we were at Breakpoint in Lisbon. We were on stage and we had just open sourced and released the Smart Message specification, like the protocol for that, which is really very similar to what is now the Blink specification. And we had like 50 partners on screen, like tons and tons of teams were really excited to build this technology with us. We were about to go to market with it. And the very next day, FTX crashed. And within just a few weeks, a huge portion of those companies were either fighting for survival, about to be dead, or just like had different priorities. And like you guys probably remember this history. It was truly a nuclear event within Solana. And we remained committed to Solana during that time. But as we looked around, sort of end of 2022 into 2023, we're saying, well, who on earth are we going to ship these smart messages with? So like, well, let's build our own product to showcase them. And then it was like, what kinds of experiences? So we launched our messaging app in early 2023, and we were saying, well, great, we want to like show people these non-crypto native experiences. You can't just message. That's not enough. Like it's not enough for it to just be like a sort of wallet-based decentralized messaging. There need to be delightful and fun new experiences. And to us, the Smart Message, what is now the Blink, was that. But then we were looking around and like, what do people want to trade? NFTs are down really bad. Like nobody's using DeFi. Like it's just truly just like crickets. I mean, truly our favorite, I don't want to underestimate it. Like our favorite companies stuck around and it's been incredible to see their success, but it was quiet back then. So we're like, all right, what can we do? Well, we can like invent a new NFT category that people would be excited to trade. So we invented NFT like collectible chat stickers. So they're just NFTs. They used an absolutely like frontier cutting edge technology by Solana called compressed NFTs, like this compression tech that's now getting much greater adoption. We were the very first team out of the gates to build with compressed NFTs that allowed our users to mint and trade and distribute and use millions of these chat stickers. But it was all powered by the Smart Message. So they were like super rare, like we called them mythic rare chat stickers. And people would be going and finding and cold messaging holders of the really mythic rare chat stickers and being like, hey, would you accept one soul? Which was actually like a lot for a chat sticker, even back then. And this whole like insane, almost like gamified economy formed inside of our chat app that was explosive and incredibly fun to see. And it was really all about showcasing the Smart Message or the Blink. So Dave, the reason I'm giving this backstory is like we did all this basically to showcase the smart message. Like the smart message, now the blink was our original mission at Dialect. The reality is, to come back to your point about SocialFi, we no longer continued development on it, in part because we, through various circumstances, realized we wanted to get back to developer tools as like Solana was recovering. But more than that, I'd say the acute reasoning behind it in late 2023 was finding product market fit and bootstrapping a social product is insanely hard. It is insanely hard. And it's not really in our DNA at Dialect. Like, it's not what we want to do. Like, I think we really struck gold in some ways with these creative ideas that we had in our messaging app. And I think we built an incredibly high polish and like very high quality consumer product. But in addition to it being a social product, it's a private messaging app social product. So like anyone who downloads and signs up for Farcaster can like follow Vitalik and DWR. They entertain tens of thousands of new signups right out of the box. But a messaging app by construction, when you download that, you're supposed to not see anyone there. It's supposed to be empty. And that's the kiss of death for bootstrapping like an ecosystem. So it's a very hard problem. I could also probably just go on forever about incredible learnings that we've had about how you bootstrap new social products, but it's not going to be interesting because we came to the null result, which is we don't want to go down that route. So I'll spare you the details on that. But basically, then it was like we had a few months of kind of back at the drawing board and then realized there was a really exciting opportunity to just reship smart messages under a very ambitious new strategy, a new branding. We did it in collaboration with Solana, and that's sort of like the backstory there. So it's really the smart message and the blink have been the through line through all of this.
And that's super interesting and helpful context. I mean, having been a founder that's straddled the fence between consumer and developer tooling, and now just having been in the market, through the trials and tribulations of Solana, what are some interesting things you're seeing in the market, perhaps from other founders maybe in SocialFi, maybe not, but what has kind of caught your eye in recent months?
I think we're developer tools and we love to work really closely with teams. I think we're at but I sometimes don't know that I have a complete view into the really, really frontier stuff. I'm personally very excited about sort of like 2 or 3 different things. Number one is obviously in the SocialFi area. I think Solana is insanely well positioned to actually have the breakout success. During the last wave with like Friend Tech and all that, there were a ton of like Solana clones that definitely were not as good as Friend Tech. And I think Friend Tech also just like, there's just an infinite graveyard of people who run into, like, that was a messaging app. So like they sort of suffered from the same challenges that every other sort of like private social network has run into. I genuinely believe that during this phase, we're going to see like a really, like Solana is going to dominate that frontier. It's a combination of, I really do think we're kind of like, as far as crypto product market fit goes, I think Telegram bots are in a really strong position. But Sal, like I'll say, onus is on you. I'm really excited. I think we barely scratched the design space there. So I'm really excited to see what you guys are all doing at Bullpen. Obviously, Pump.Fun is just like cruising along. And I thought that was incredibly innovative. I loved, I think it was like Mike Dudas or someone else had said they really were like the first real honest to God, like figured out the launchpad, and it just looked nothing like what all the previous attempts at being a token launchpad looked like. And so that kind of just orient by 45 degrees. It's a totally different view into what is ostensibly the same opportunity. And it's just like incredibly creative. There have been newer SocialFi experiments kind of like in the meme coin space that are more and more getting into like the game theory. So like really fun one that I've seen, they're still doing a lot of discovery work, is Meme Royale, which is quite like Pump.Fun, but Battle Royale. And so you can quite literally like battle 2 tokens and the winner will rug all the liquidity of the loser. And so it's just some really fascinating stuff there. And then a few more in the SocialFi space that I can't quite, I don't know that I can talk about yet, in part because I've only gotten little bits and details, but I just think that's an incredibly ripe creative design space. I think consumer should be weird. I don't think it should be kind of like that we're trying to get mainstream adoption through being more normal. I think weird is good. Like Unlonely is another really good app I think is really fun. It's not as new though. I think they've been around for a bit. But then the other half of it is just, honest to God, just like I'm a new mobile wallet user and I just don't know what to do. And like Earn is the killer crypto app. Like Earn, like just earn more off of your tokens and your funds. And so even just just like, this is a shameless shill for Dialect of like, if we can really dramatically reduce the time it takes to bring more crypto into, for example, these front doors, like the mobile wallets, and more users get more on chain and earn more and just like are created like greater and more flexible economic opportunity. That's the other extreme end of the spectrum of just like, and then obviously all the stuff with payments. And so those would be the three that I would give. And like the last one, obviously payments is just a huge problem space, but I like love seeing the work that people are doing.
Does your view on messaging apps, because you keep saying decentralized messaging app, it's not going to work, and various apps have sort of run into that roadblock. Do you not think that post the Durov arrest, and I think Telegram have changed their terms and conditions afterwards, that there will be the need for something like that, and maybe the demand could be there, or at least private?
Well, you're absolutely right that if you look at the adoption of the messaging apps of the 2010s, they took off because of disruptive events like that. Like a service was shut off in like, let's say all of Russia. And so they like Russians needed to find a different, or I don't remember which country specifically, but a big amount of Telegram's growth was a disruptive event like that. So there's no telling for like, I don't want to go so far as to call it a black swan event, but you're absolutely right. Where I think, it still remains to be seen is like Signal is a really good privacy messaging app, and yet so few people, basically nobody in crypto uses it. So this is a stated versus revealed preference of like WhatsApp, iMessage, Signal, like these are all end-to-end encrypted by default. Telegram is like the weird one, like not end-to-end encrypted, and yet all of crypto uses it. And so I think it's more a stated versus revealed preference that the crypto community wants. And that's more like private messaging, not decentralized. I think the bar is even higher for decentralized. I think this is again a stated versus revealed preference. I like our swing with our messaging app deep in the bear market was that that's stated, not revealed, and that it's actually fun. It's entertainment. Like the most, I don't know that there's an actual real revealed need for decentralized messaging. And so I'm curious if you guys have seen it, but I don't feel like I have.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you don't really need it until you do, right? The black swan point you were making earlier.
Yeah.
But just generally what I've noticed as well, to your point about messaging apps, is like the one out of those examples, WhatsApp, Signal, what have you, that have, or iMessage, that are end-to-end encrypted, and crypto coalescing around Telegram, like, it's just by far the easiest to manage lots of contacts and lots of chats. Like that user experience, just it's not there to do that same action for
and
those
that's
other
me.
apps. And
I personally,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I optimize for UX, and I think most of us do. So.
Right. I think that's the broader point, is whether it's doing things on chain, buying stuff, messaging contacts, we as humans just optimize for the UX first and foremost. That is our revealed preference. And so, over optimizing for what we think should be done, right? We should all be using Signal because it's more private. Well, it's just a little bit less usable, and people are just not going to want to trough through the sludge to make that happen for an ideology.
Yeah. And even when we were building our messaging app, I think we took a very non-consensus bet on the value prop, which is the like crypto, there's just infinite, like quote unquote, like decentralized messaging apps, and quite a few even just like protocol layer companies. And I don't know that the demand has really been revealed there. I think it was, our bet was entertainment and fun, and that magic of UX of just like people told us when they were bartering, like they were quite literally like cabals in Dialect, price manipulating sticker prices and stuff that I'd heard of, at least rumor of, trying to move the markets in these huge like 10,000 person group chats where there's all these airdrop farmers. And so it was like these like cabals versus the airdrop farmers, and price manipulating and like doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I hope that's okay for me to say. I one, did not participate, and two, didn't really, I'd only heard about it anecdotally. And they said it was the most fun they'd had since like playing EverQuest and like some other crazy like MMOs. They were like, it's basically an MMO. And so that's what I think anyone who's going to really like solve the messaging problem, I do think they need to provide entertainment first. And that was like really, and the other example I'd give is like Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, iMessage. They're all early 2010s, late 2000s messaging platforms. Name a single messaging product that's actually gained traction since then. And they're actually all messaging sidekicks on a public social product. So like TikTok, Instagram, those others. I genuinely believe that like messaging is only going to take off as like a sidekick to a public social feed, because the network effects of a private social network are like even more punishing than the ones of a public one. So
yeah, I think that's right. Of course, we covered a lot of ground throughout this interview. Are there any sort of closing thoughts or things you want our listeners to look forward to as you continue building out an impressive stack of developer tooling through Dialect?
Yeah, only thing is just we love talking to users, and in this case, those are customers. So if you're a founder, if you're a product manager, if you're a developer, any of the above, you don't have to be technical. If you're interested in getting involved with us to like find out what our technology can do, find out how we can support you, like Blinks have not found product market fit yet, and we will find them by talking to all of you and figuring out, like, I've given my case today of where we see this technology going, but we're very keen to support and find out what that is. Like, we learned it through our customers. And so, like, shameless, we're always interested in talking to teams. So reach out to us on Twitter. And then also we are hiring for a handful of roles. We've actually made some progress on that in the last couple of months. But if you're interested in working with us, we'd love to get in touch.
Fantastic. And we'll have all the links to reach out to you and to the Blinks, or the Dialect team rather, in the show notes. Chris, thanks for taking the time. Super fun convo.
Yeah, Sal and Dave, my pleasure. Really appreciate you having us on, and thank you.